Good morning, members of the press, and season's greetings. Thank you for coming. I'm very excited this morning because as of Thursday, September 22nd, I announced that I intended to establish an independent commission of inquiry into football and cricket to review the financial standing of the Bermuda Football Association and the Bermuda Cricket Board. Particular emphasis would focus on an examination of exactly how the special grant funding allocated to these two national sports governing bodies over the last 6 to 7 years was indeed used in respect of the continued development at all levels of the respective national sports. Today, I am humbled and I am extremely pleased to announce that the Commission has concluded its report, which I have received and am making available to the general public. I would like to thank the Chair of the Commission, Mr. William Medeiros, to my immediate right, the Deputy Chairs, Mr. Donald Dane and Ms. Sheila Brown, to my immediate left, as well as Committee Member Mr. Sean Tucker, who is to my far right. I would like to thank them, of course, for their time, their invaluable, committed effort that was made to produce this report in a timely and efficient fashion. I would also like to express my profound gratitude to the Bermuda Football Association, the BFA, and the Bermuda Cricket Board, the BCB, for their cooperation and contribution to the Commission's work. I would now like to pass it on over to our Commission Chair, Mr. Medeiros, to offer a few remarks on behalf of the Commissions. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. My name is William Medeiros, and I'm the Chairman of the Commission of Inquiry. My Deputy Chairs, as announced earlier, are Ms. Sheila Brown. Sheila, good morning. And Mr. Donald Dane, who unfortunately can't be with us here today. In addition, my fellow Commissioners were Mr. Jeffrey Richardson, Mr. Charles Marshall, Mr. Clyde Best, all of whom sadly can't join us this morning, and Mr. Sean Tucker. Good morning to you, Sean. First of all, we'd like to start by thanking the Minister for actually allowing us the honor of actually participating in the Commission of Inquiry. We'd also like to wish to thank the PS, Department Secretary Mr. Wayne Carey, the entire team at the Ministry, and especially the executive and members of both the Bermuda Football Association, otherwise known as the BFA, and the Bermuda Cricket Board, the BCB. The Commission has only ever enjoyed the full cooperation of all parties mentioned. The Commission can report that all discussions were had in a very forthright and collaborative fashion. The Commission also wishes to point out the absolute lack of interference by any individual or group. Everyone will be aware that the Minister, the Honourable Glenn Blakeney, announced in September of this year a Commission of Inquiry into the BFA and the BCB. The Commission was intended to be a short, sharp exercise and was designed to have a very narrow point of focus. The points to be covered were, number one, investigate the financial standing of the two aforementioned governing bodies. 2, investigate the allocation of the special grants monies. 3, examine the extent to which the governing bodies had used the grant money to address antisocial behavior. It was immediately obvious to us that we would need to stick very closely to our remit. Sport, as we all know it, is very serious stuff in Bermuda. Along the way, I must admit, some very interesting items were raised, but of particular importance to us on the Commission was to give the Bermudian people the answers to the specific questions being asked. Stay on point. Number one, in the first instance, the Commission can report that all evidence indicates that both governing bodies are in good financial standing with up-to-date, unqualified, audited financials. Both bodies have good systems in place regarding the counting of cash. Both bodies are duly registered as charities. We think it is noteworthy that both bodies are not only intent on making and meeting local financial requirements, they spoke much of their responsibility to report to their own parent bodies For example, in the case of the BFA, it's FIFA, and in the case of the BCB, it's the ICC. There are a number of layers of reporting and responsibility. Number two, the Commission can report that it found no evidence that the grant monies had been used for any other purpose other than agreed upon in the grants. In this instance, to use my language, the use of a drip feed by the ministry is to be commended. Monies were only made available once it was shown that the earlier monies had been spent and that they'd been spent on the items specifically called for, designated. The Commission can further report, number three, that both bodies have invested a significant amount of money, time, and effort in combating antisocial behavior. Amongst those efforts, and this is just the tip of the iceberg, are drug testing, physical security, the actual grounds themselves, disciplinary action against players, etc. On this topic, both bodies agree that antisocial behavior is a multifaceted topic which requires action on a number of different levels. Both bodies asked that we as a Commission express their sincere thanks for the support afforded by the government and people of Bermuda. They did, however, caution that an ongoing cutback in funding could, might, would cause parts of their programs to be reviewed and possibly, in some cases, maybe even dropped. The Commission noted the tremendous amount of commitment and sacrifice evidenced by the executive and members of the governing bodies. These people put in a great deal of their own personal time to make these things happen. In closing, the Commission believes that Bermuda has been and continues to be well served by the BFA and the BCB. The Commission believes that participation in organized sport can only help in creating better citizens. Thank you. I learned this a long time ago. But let's, early on, if I may, the Minister made it abundantly clear that he wanted us to focus in a very narrow way on these three specific things. And I think that we tried very hard to do that. Sport is not just about money. It's not just about grants. It's not just about grounds. It's about a multitudinous thing. And I say all of that to simply say that on the three specific topics that the Minister has asked us to speak to, I would certainly give both governing bodies, we would certainly give both governing bodies more than a passing grade. I think they serve Bermuda well. I think it's also fair to say, however, that during the course of our discussions and conversations and deliberations, some other topics which came up for discussion. So I don't wish to avoid the question, and the answer is, could you completely, absolutely exonerate them? No. And I say that because there's always better things that can be done. They themselves, the governing bodies, outside of our remit, spoke to things that if they could, they'd like to do better. But have they accounted for the money? Yes. Was the money spent where it was supposed to be spent? Yes. Have they spent money in tackling antisocial behavior? Yes. Could they do more? Of course they could. In going through the report, again, talking outside the remit, there were one or two what I refer to as ancillary items that came up. One of them is the unique stance that the executive of both governing bodies find as it relates to governing their constituencies. If I may, let's just use the BFA, just purely as an example. The same is true of both of them. In order to be on the executive of the BFA, first we've got to love the sport. I mean, no good being there if you don't love soccer, I don't think. And so, oftentimes, the people that are populating the executive of the BFA love soccer, and by inference, they're members of the clubs over which they have domain. But they get voted in by the clubs. And I'm not suggesting, if I may, I'm not suggesting the Commission is suggesting that that's not the way to do it. I'm simply suggesting that it must be difficult to administer the very same groups that voted you in. I must admit, in saying that to the Minister says, well, welcome to politics. I can't help but think that if there was some methodology by which there could be a divorcing of the two, it's got to be a bit easier to say to the fellow, look, I don't think you're doing this as well as you could, and maybe you might like to step up. But I think that's for greater minds than this commission. Again, if I may, we were very desirous of doing this short, sharp, getting information back out, because I think the primary concern was the money.
Just when you talk about the governing bodies and
Yes.
the funding and the way they used it, and
Yes.
in terms, I imagine in terms of the very strict guidelines,
Yes.
this is how much you were given, this is what you
Yes.
spent it on, that's fine. But was there, so you never actually looked beyond at whether it had been spent, whether the money that had been spent had actually brought back some kind of return?
I guess the short answer is no.
Okay.
I'll restate what I said earlier. I think the ministry is to be commended for setting it up the way they did. You couldn't get your hands on this money. First of all, the money wasn't given out in one lump sum. We don't have a lot of money. It could only be gotten when you first of all proved that the last time I gave you money, you spent it where you said you're going to spend it, and this new money I'm going to spend it where you are. In terms of performance-based, Sheila, Sean, I don't think that featured in it. I think a great deal of time and effort. We saw the original proposals, and if you haven't seen them, these are voluminous documents. A lot of time and a lot of effort went into saying, if you give us this money, this is where we're going to spend it. In terms of performance, no, sir, I don't think that's part of it.
And we're getting bang for our buck, and we continue to get bang for our buck with regard to developmental programs, particularly at youth level. You will note that there was the special BFA facility that was developed at Prospect, albeit with the assistance of FIFA. Well, FIFA would not have allocated funding to a domestic national governing body if they did not feel comfortable that they were on the right track, for one. For two, a manifestation would have been our last go-round in the qualifying matches for the World Cup, where we acquitted ourselves well enough for everyone around the world to say that in our region we were very competitive. In fact, we beat one of the better teams, which was Trinidad, and we saw the level of support that was there for the home leg matches with regard to the spectators that showed up to encourage our national team. I will say with that, also, we have committed as a government to the Convention of the World Anti-Doping Association compliance issues through the legislative process, which was a criterion that we had to meet. As a result of that, we can say unequivocally that anyone that is on the national sports of cricket and football's teams or squads are drug-free because they've had to be tested. So we have people involved in the sports now, without exception, who have complied with what is required to meet the criterion to represent the country. So we're very happy. Now, I thought in the beginning it might be a sacrifice, because we do know that there are a number of people engaged in very active sports who also engage in recreational drug use. And suffice that to say, cannabis and maybe some others. But the commitment to ensure that athletes are drug-free goes way beyond, as you would know, the recreational drugs. There are drugs that I can't even pronounce the name of that are deemed to be performance-enhancing drugs. That means that our athletes are completely drug-free. Now, it's going to cost this government to be in compliance with WADA $750,000 approximately a year to be operational and to engage in the way that we must to meet the compliance issues. So we're very pleased, because even if it's a sacrifice that we don't have the best players on the field, we have the best deserving players on the field. And that's what warms my heart, because those players automatically become role models for those younger players that aspire to the national level in representing their country. I will also state at this time that